Welcome to the Geekly. My name is Jules.
I'm Lex, and just to start things off, the CW has had a bit of an upset. Ruby Rose is out as Batwoman. There still will be a season 2, so the quest to find the new Batwoman is apparently on. Okay, I haven't watched Batwoman since Crisis, so I've kind of been turned off the Arrowverse for the moment. But I have to admit, my whole interest in Batwoman was kind of Ruby Rose. I thought she did it really well. This is going to sound kind of misogynistic, but I always thought Batwoman was kind of a lame character, and I was a little bit dubious about them making an entire show about her. And I wasn't overly impressed with the first half of the season, which is probably why I didn't go back after Crisis. That said, I'm still a bit disappointed that Ruby Rose isn't going to be in the role anymore. What about you?
We reviewed the first, I think, 3 or 4 episodes on this podcast of Batwoman, and I've got to be honest, I thought it was poison. After Crisis, the point where you stopped watching, it actually, I thought, became a lot better. I don't know what it was. They just seemed to find themselves. The show clicked. The character of Alice actually became kind of meaningful. Mary was great. I don't know how it happened. It just suddenly became a very good show. But I've always felt, and again, I'm really sorry to say this because I know she's got quite a big following. I know she's, a real badass and people loved her in Orange is the New Black, but I always felt that she was the weak part of the show. I just felt her acting was incredibly wooden. I feel like since Arrow has stopped being on TV, the CW is now looking for a new kind of flagship show. And I know this has a little bit more money than the rest. It looks and sounds better than the rest. I just feel like if they make a really good casting choice, this could be like a really, really good show. It will never have probably the Joker. It will never have the Riddler, Two-Face, people like that. But they've just added Hush. And oh my God, his outfit is so comics accurate. It just fills me with this kind of warmth inside that Batman villains are being realised well on a TV show. I hated Gotham. That's another story for another time. So I just really hope they do their best. And I think I saw Evan Rachel Wood mentioned on Twitter today, which I liked. I know you didn't so much like that.
I can't really see her as Batwoman. Like you, I kind of had a look around for various actors, in the right age range, and nobody really stuck out. So I kind of want them to just go for an unknown or maybe a not overly established actor. Obviously, she needs to be LGBT because it would be wrong for them to hire a straight person. But yeah, I think it might just be good to go somewhere new. And as far as Ruby Rose seeming wooden, I kind of wonder how much of that was directed for her to be that way, because seeing her in other things, and she's not a very wooden actor, but the Bat Fam seems to have this sort of stoic aura to it, or people seem to presume that they have to have this stoic aura. I mean, in Titans, Dick Grayson is kind of the same. Jason Todd is completely not, but he's also kind of the immoral one. So, But yeah, I guess we'll see in season 2 who they get to play Batwoman and how she takes on the role.
Okay, let's move on to Upload. We watched episodes 2 and episode 3 of Upload today. We watched episode 2, which was Nora basically needing to get her rating above 4.8 so that her dad could use her employee discount because he's got vape lung, of all things. And she's basically just doing errands to try and help her rating go up. In episode 3, Nathan basically attended his own funeral, which was not a great affair. It's kind of about a journey of self-discovery. It's kind of like as if somebody's having a midlife crisis and they want to search to figure out who they actually are. Someone that's very lost, but instead of it being within their life, it's happened at the moment of their death. And I think it's obviously a ridiculous scenario that he's watched his own funeral, realised he basically has no real friends in the world. People are talking about the idea that he was murdered. His best friend / business partner, or whatever he is, Jamie, won't respond to his calls. So everything about his life has kind of evolved. He's seen his girlfriend is actually a fucking tyrant. And it's now just going to be, for my money anyway, it's just going to be this kind of quest for self to figure out what life, what life is or what life was. It's hard to say. And just find some inner peace, I guess, some peace in his death that he maybe didn't have in his life, and to grow as a person in death rather than in life. It's very confusing. It's all very backward, but I'm really enjoying it. What are your thoughts on Upload at the moment? Are you enjoying it?
I am enjoying it. It's a bit of a weird mix of things for me, though. I mean, obviously, you can tell by the way it's filmed, the filter and the lighting and everything. It's meant to be kind of a lighthearted show. There's a lot of comedy. Some of the comedy doesn't really fall right. There are a few gags that's kind of like, all right, I see what you're doing, but it's not funny. But then, kind of mixed in, there are these really dark, intense moments that kind of catch you off guard because you're just sort of going around in this sort of lighthearted, jokey kind of atmosphere, and then bam, Ingrid is about to delete Nathan because they're having an argument. You're like, oh shit. And particularly for me, the dynamic between Ingrid and Nathan, the fact that she has so much control over him. I mean, he is basically her prisoner for all eternity because of the situation he's in. It really upsets me. Then there's, him trying to cope with being dead and with having everything taken away from him. I think he says it at some point, he feels like he needs to be a man, and I think a lot of people feel that way. He says, like, when you're a kid, everybody does everything for you, everybody takes care of you and do this, and then you grow up and you can start doing things for yourself and making decisions for yourself. And he says, I had that, or I almost had that, and then it was all taken away from me. And you see his kind of very real struggle of, he was kind of on the verge of something great and kind of achieving all of his dreams, and then he was just killed. And I think Robbie Amell in particular, his acting in this show is so on point. It's probably, like I said this last week, but it's the best thing I've ever seen him in. And he manages to capture that kind of frustration and disappointment and the realization that Ingrid literally has control over his existence, and he has to just appease her in whatever way possible. It's really heartbreaking in a lot of ways. I know, like, you kind of just see it as sort of a fun thing, but yeah, I actually, like, I'm really enjoying it, and I watched it last night, and I really wanted to watch episode 4, but it was, like, super late, and I don't like to get ahead of the podcast either, so I didn't. But I also find watching this show incredibly stressful and tense. Like, I'm on edge throughout, like, entire episodes.
Oh, that scenario is terrifying. Somebody basically with an off-on switch on the back of you. It's probably how Arissa feels. Just it's exactly the same way that an android would feel, that constant need to appease your master, to, continue in servitude because you can just be shut off at a moment's notice. I found it really interesting as well that the idea of the upload is something brand new to us, in episode 1. In episode, was it the end of episode? No, I think it was beginning of episode 3. They have this idea of the download, where they take the subconscious and put it back into a human body using your own DNA and like a 3D printer. And the fact that was terrifying. The fact that he was like begging them to put his subconscious back into Upload, and they couldn't do it in time, so he died again, in front of them.
He didn't just die.
Oh,
his
Jesus,
head
yeah.
fucking exploded in this massive gore.
Like a mirror of what it is to go into Upload. Your head gets vaporized, and when you would go, when he was in download, his head just exploded right in front of everybody.
I don't really empathize with the people who get uploaded because I've realized I have this huge bias against rich people, and so I wasn't, looking at this guy and him being delighted that he could feel things. I wasn't totally invested in him. And I kind of expected it to not work, so I was waiting for the moment when it was going to fail, because obviously if the downloads worked, then Robbie Amell would be brought back to life very quickly, and that would kind of ruin the whole conceit of the show. But I did find myself, like, when he was, like, very panicked and begging them to essentially save his life, it was really effective, and you did kind of identify with this person that you essentially only had maybe 10 or 15 seconds of interaction with.
What do you think's going to happen in terms of the story long term? Because obviously, if it seems like, I don't know how long the show will run for, but it feels like download is the long term aim. But at the same time, I wonder whether, Nora's dad is going to choose a natural death. And so Nora will have this employee discount. She's got all the money. And I hope that she might rescue Nathan so that he can either stay in download and not be beholden to his girlfriend anymore, or unfortunately tragedy might befall her and she might end up in Lakeview as well. I don't think the latter, but I'm more inclined to think that the former is something that's going to happen as they try to kind of solve the mystery of, who's ultimately killed him. The father seems fairly set in his ways that he wants a natural death because he wants to, meet up with his wife in heaven. But that feels like that plot's developing and something's going to happen with that spot at Lakeview. So it might get to the point where Nathan has pissed off Ingrid so much that she is about to kind of switch him off, but there's this kind of, move across to a different plan, and Nora might be his angel in an entirely different way.
Well, I think it's fairly obvious that Nora and Nathan are gonna fall for each other. How that exactly is gonna play out with one of them being dead and virtual and the other being alive and very not virtual, I'm not sure. I did consider the possibility that Nora would die and she would end up in Lakeview with him, but I think if that happened, the show would basically be over. Obviously, there's going to be some sort of conflict between Nathan and Ingrid as things progress with Nora, even if they don't actually get into a relationship with each other. I'm sure at some point Ingrid is going to catch on that he has this kind of overly familiar relationship with his angel, who also happens to be a fairly attractive woman. So yeah, I think the kind of foreshadowing that Ingrid would be very willing to delete him is going to come up again, and possibly Nora will have to step in and save him. I think, as you said, the option to download is going to be one of the destination points that we hit, and eventually, I can't imagine them doing it this season. Maybe if it goes to a second season, they will download him, or maybe at the end of the first season, he will be downloaded into a new body. It depends on how quickly they wrap up the whole murder mystery scenario, and exactly what's happening with Jamie and the program and that whole network of things. But I definitely think that Nora is going to be very involved in helping him solve the mystery of why he can't remember things and what exactly happened to lead to his death. Plus, his cousin, Fran Booth, who is a middle school gym teacher, not an investigator at all, is now on the case.
She is a delight. I love Fran.
I'm so worried that she's going to get killed doing this, because she is, I really enjoy her, and I was a little bit worried when she first started investigating, but then when Nathan was like, "You're not even an investigator, you're a gym teacher," it was just like, oh fuck, she's going to die, they're going to murder her.
No, Fran's too wily. She'll get out of it somehow. She'll use her gym prowess to kind of backflip her way out of danger.
Hopefully, she and Nora hook up together and, go on this kind of murder mystery investigation together. I would watch that.
I'm actually enjoying this a lot more than I thought I would. Like I said last week, it's not, exactly going to change my life. It's not, revolutionary in any particular way. It's got some fun new concepts. I'm mostly enjoying it as a bit of a guilty pleasure kind of feeling. But I'm weirdly invested in the murder mystery, it must be said. I like the characters involved. And I think you're right. I think Robbie Amell might be... It's kind of, I would say, mostly comedy. I think he might be more of a kind of comedy actor because a lot of the stuff he's doing involves great comedic timing. And yeah, I think he's doing a pretty good job. I think Nora's doing a pretty good job as well.
I think the strength of both of them is that they are very skilled in doing things with a lot of nuance. As you mentioned, there are a lot of kind of comedic moments, but it's never ham-fisted or overdone, as opposed to how it was in Stargirl. It's got great timing. They know just how far to push it so that it's funny and kind of quirky without going overboard and kind of beating a dead horse with the same joke over and over and over again. I like the fact that, all right, we're 3 episodes in. I don't remember how many episodes there are total. But, sometimes a lot of murder mysteries, or just mysteries in general, particularly on serial television shows, very early on, you're like, oh yeah, that's the culprit right there. And every single episode, my opinion on who the culprit is has kind of shifted a little bit as we get more and more information, as people do different things. And I'm right now my focus is on Jamie. I think he's being very suspicious, but like last week I was thinking, I was absolutely convinced Ingrid had something to do with it. This week I'm kind of like, she's just a bitch. I'm not sure why they're together though, so maybe she does have something to do with it. I don't know. It's still very much a mystery, and I like that I haven't been able to figure it out.
Okay, let's move on to Stargirl. I thought it, as a pilot episode, there wasn't anything particularly unique about her origin story, or the story in general. Even in a non-superhero sense, she's just a brat that's constantly moved around and around and around, kind of grown up without a father, and she's been put together with this new, brother and stepdad, and so that part of it's not, particularly unique. But as for the superhero element, I thought it had quite a lot of old-fashioned sentiment. It was full of heart, kind of an optimistic take on things. It was quite, warm and wholesome, and I quite enjoyed that. And it felt like, the JSA, I think the first comics came out in the 1940s, but the whole show feels like it has a very old-fashioned sentiment. It feels like a throwback in many ways. It feels kind of timeless, or out of time, I should say, kind of in a way that like Watchmen did. And we've had this golden era of superheroes only 10 years ago, which I found a little bit strange. And the fact that they've either died or kind of retired off into normal civilian lives, kind of like, again, a bit like Watchmen. It's just, it feels a little bit different. It feels like nothing we've had in the Arrowverse so far. And for those of you, who are aware of the DC streaming service, and it was Titans, it was Doom Patrol, it was Swamp Thing, and this was number 4. This was the one they always planned to do after that, and it is being released on CW, but the full uncut version of every episode is being released on the DC streaming service, so it's got that extra kind of bit of money towards it. And the opening scene, forget the dialogue, because as you said, John McHale, it seems he's always cast in these kind of smarmy, arrogant arsehole kind of roles, so the dialogue was exactly what you'd expect, and you're absolutely right in your observations. But that opening scene, in terms of the visual spectacle, was, I thought, an absolute sensation. It was really enjoyable to watch, and that was kind of it for the episode in terms of visuals. I'll come on to the staff in a second, but that gave me a lot of confidence into what might come later with this show. And then when she found the photo and it had a flash in it, and the fact that there's been talk that there's going to be a Green Lantern in this show, I'm cautiously optimistic. She's doing perfectly as bratty, shitty teen. You can't really fault her for that. I think Luke Wilson as this kind of bumbling stepdad, absolutely perfect. Her mum is Amy Smart as well, who I was absolutely in love with in the 90s. I'm kind of enjoying it. And the staff, it's kind of a hybrid of Harry Potter's broomstick and Doctor Strange's cloak. And that thing, it's got its own personality, and again, like, the visuals on that were really good. I'm enjoying it, and I would be interested in watching a little bit more. It doesn't feel like anything else, certainly on the CW. It's mostly kind of like Doom Patrol, as in like a golden era throwback kind of show with a completely different sentiment.
I think for a CW show, it's kind of all right. It's not the best one out there. For a DC streaming show, it's a huge disappointment, though. Like you said, the opening visuals were really great. The dialogue completely let it down, though. I mean, if they just had, none of these quips or anything, and just, Pat trying to weave in and all of these, I don't know what to call them, like power bursts, magic things flying around and explosions and all of that, like, that would have been cool. Yeah, I had a lot of problems with it. Really just did not enjoy it. There wasn't a lot of originality to it. As you said, it's a fairly standard story of like this bratty teenager thrown into a blended family and not adapting well. Yeah, just generally kind of meh all around.
Okay, so let's move on to The Rain season 1. Long story short, the rain carries the virus. People have to stay out of the rain, or they just literally like die on the spot. So a pair of siblings live in a bunker for 6 years because their dad kind of, he knows what's coming. We think he's something to do with this virus. So basically shoves them down this bunker, says, I'll come back for you 6 years later, they're still down there. The young boy is actually it's a new actor. That's how much he's kind of grown during that time. And the kids decide, right, we've got to go. And they basically, alongside some other people who come into the fold, do a tour of the little area where they live, going bunker to bunker, eventually hoping to meet up with their father at Apollon headquarters and basically figure out the mystery of the rain. That's what it's about, really. And it's kind of, it's Danish, it's kind of Scandi noir in terms of tone, in terms of lens filter, in terms of general emotions and theme throughout it. I got shades of kind of Resident Evil, got some shades of The Wicker Man, a little bit of Lost, as they're kind of, constantly walking through woods rather than jungle. There's a sense of 28 Days Later. And very early on, pretty much from episode 2, we learn that there's a kind of Children of Men element to it as well. I think this is an exceptionally well-made and engaging TV show. But I was of the belief that it never really got away from the trappings of a very ultra worn out plot for post-apocalyptic ragtag bunch heading for quote unquote the haven, or quote unquote the cure, or quote unquote the solution to all of their problems. It kind of, that's where it remained for the whole thing. It looks beautiful and everybody's well cast, and I actually had kind of the opposite problem to Better Than Us, because I kind of liked all of them. What was unique is the fact that we've got this group of characters and they actually worked on their interpersonal relationships and actually realised value in each other. In Hollywood, the siblings would be prisoners the whole season. But in episode 2, they form an understanding with the people that they meet. In Hollywood, Martin would have probably, something happens with a girl called Beatrice. He would have probably held a grudge for, 5 episodes. But he talks to her, he communicates and says, you know what? You're right. You're absolutely right. And it just had this kind of very mature, grown-up sentiment to it, where the characters would just talk things out. And it was really refreshing. All in all, it's not really that unique. And so I'm not really enjoying it that much. What were your thoughts?
I absolutely love this show. It could be because I watched it directly after Stargirl, so I was kind of in a slump, oh my god, that really sucked. And then I was gifted this really, really amazing, shiny object. I do love Scandinavian film. They do creepy better than anybody else in the fucking world. With perhaps the exception of the Japanese. Japanese do creepy pretty well as well. But in terms of setting, tone, and atmosphere, and using the environment to kind of really creep you out, I think all of the Scandinavian countries are really, really excellent at that. And it's probably because the landscape around them is kind of creepy and weird, and desolate in a lot of ways, because the population is scattered a lot. So they have a lot of these wild areas still to kind of play into Gothic tropes. As far as the, post-apocalyptic fiction does follow a lot of similar threads, and there's usually always this kind of group of this motley group of people who have been thrown together because of circumstances, trying to get to somewhere. And that in itself, as far as plot, can be a little repetitive. The thing that I enjoy about post-apocalyptic fiction, because I do enjoy it, even though it does have a lot of the similar things, is that it's never so much about the plot or the threat, or The Walking Dead isn't about zombies. This is not so much about the rain. These are just kind of vehicles to create a particular environment for the characters to really explore concepts of identity and family and interpersonal relationships and morality. Morality usually plays a huge part in this, because inevitably the characters get put up against a point where they have to let someone die. I mean, this happened fairly early on for Rasmus and Simona. One dad goes off, and he totally he did this. He goes off and very mysteriously is like, I have to go fix this and I'll be right back. And you think it's going to be okay, mom and kids, and they're going to stay there for a few weeks, and then dad's going to come back, or something's going to happen. And then, the kids open the door for the one guy, and mom kind of runs and has to get through the decontamination things. And then she just launches herself out into the rain to save her kids. And the two kids are watching her, like, I don't even know what happened to her, like, deteriorate, convulse. It was pretty, like, intense to watch, particularly considering that, one of the kids was 11 and the other is, like, probably 18. As you're just thinking, like, there are these two kids left alone. And at one point, Simona's going to, like, leave Rasmus when he's still a kid, alone in the bunker. And I was just thinking, like, oh my god, that's got to be terrifying. And of course, Rasmus freaks out and begs her to stay. And so they end up being there for 6 years, which I did not see coming. But yeah, I really, like you said, it's cast wonderfully. All of the actors do a great job. You really kind of empathize with these people and really get invested in who they are. You can understand where they're coming from, where they're thinking about, or what they're thinking about. And I really like the atmosphere. I think I'm definitely excited to see what happens in season 2 and how it all develops. And the strengths of post-apocalyptic fiction, whether it's film, TV, books, whatever, comes down to the individual characters and their characterization and their way of perceiving and interacting with the post-apocalyptic environment they're put into. And I think in that way, this does do some very unique things, and that's what makes it worth watching.
Yeah, I think you're right about like tone of that kind of that area of the world. I think they do that kind of creepiness better than anyone. And it's like you said, I think it is a lot down to landscape. Often just walking through these woodlands. I just wish they would commit to it. I just wish we could have some silence, some bird song or some, eerie quiet instead of just constant, Danish music throughout. I think it's really a good point that you made about the kind of interpersonal aspect of it. It's not necessarily about the destination with these kind of shows. It's about the journey. It's about figuring out who you are, becoming a team, learning how to function in this kind of new world order. And that's like I said, that's kind of where I found this show to be unique. These people were adult, and there are some very particular conversations between Martin and Beatrice, Simone and Erasmus, and yeah, I just hadn't really come across that before. I also like the fact that every episode we got their flashback backstory. We had some flashbacks in Better Than Us, and I said I liked them because they were short, they were necessary, and they just cut right to the point. That's kind of what we got here as well. These episodes range between about 38 minutes and 48 minutes, and we got some very concise, very useful backstory that would just add a little bit of flavouring. It was like putting a little bit of salt on your food, just that tiny bit of flavouring to pad some of these characters out, to understand them better and to understand what their lives were like before the rain. I'm intrigued, but it's not doing anything particularly new. But yeah, if they can give me an interesting story in season 2, I'll be happy to watch it.
Cool. So I guess that does it for us this week. We're working on lots of cool new Patreon content, including reviews of some Star Trek films. We're going to be watching Justice League Dark and Justice League Dark Apocalypse War. We've got more Podcastaway being put up, and I think at some point we're going to watch the Cowboy Bebop film, which I'm super excited about because it's amazing.
Yeah, I've had no interaction with the Cowboy Bebop world at all, so I'm curious.
I love Cowboy Bebop. It was actually my introduction to anime, and I've watched all of the episodes and the film so many times, it's ridiculous, and it never gets old. So yeah, we've got some really exciting things coming up. We're going to be doing some more. We're going to be doing season 2 of Reign next week, as well as Stargirl episode 2 and the beginning of Snowpiercer, which I am curious, kind of excited, kind of wary about, but yeah, lots of feelings about that. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
I saw a tweet. It's apparently somebody said it was a crime procedural, which is sort of interesting. But again, you throw post-apocalyptic at me and I'm there.
See you next week.
Bye.